This is all directly from the horse's mouth. So when I ask you, is it the small hats, or the anti-Christian sewer dwellers, or the Frankists, or the Bolsheviks? Look, I have to keep this YouTube friendly once again because there's no free speech on this platform. My answer is, in so little words, yes. And I'll tell you why 2% of the population is at the root of 90% of institutional problems in North America in the first half of this rant. And I'll tell you in the second half why you should move on for the sake of your own sovereignty and entirely check out of the system altogether. So first things first, what does the Talmud, their holiest book, their New Testament, and source for their moral conditioning since childbirth have to say about us mere human beings, whom they refer to as goys? The Talmud holds that only they, those who shall not be named, are true human beings, and Gentiles, us, goyim, which means cattle or beast, no different than dogs or property with no autonomy, below second-class citizenry, or slaves, we are to be utilized as their playthings. And I've compiled actual excerpts from the rabbinic teachings. The following are shocking but exact quotes from their various books that they believe in. So we first have Sanhedrin 59a. Murdering goyim, meaning your family and yourself, is like killing a wild animal, something to be hunted in jest. Because as written in Avodah Zarah 26b, even the best of the Gentiles should be killed. And this is why in Sanhedrin 59a, a goy who pries into the law, which means the Talmud, is guilty of death. And then they reiterate in Liber David 37, to communicate anything to a goy about our religious relations would be equal to the killing of all of them. For if the goyim knew what we teach about them, they would kill us openly. They literally do not want you knowing their belief system. And I'll explain to you in a little bit why that is. Yebamoth 11b, sexual intercourse with a little girl is permitted if she is 3 years of age. Shabuth Hag 6d, they may swear falsely by using subterfuge wording. In other words, lying is permitted, which is why it's pointless actually debating or conversing with them in a good faith conversation, because all they have is manipulative double talking, constantly exhibited on the world's political stage, for example. Hikoth Akum X1, do not save goyim in danger of death. In the same excerpt, show no mercy to the goyim. We don't deserve any mercy. Choshenham 388:15. If it can be proven that someone has given the money of Israelites to the goyim, a way must be found after prudent consideration to wipe him off the face of the earth. Sazalath Utzabat, the book of Joridiah 17. They should and must make a false oath when the goyim asks if our books contain anything about them. Baba Nasia 114. They are human beings, but the nation of the world are not human beings, but beasts. Simeon Hadarson, FOL 56d. When the Messiah comes, every one of them will have 2,800 slaves. Nidrash Talpiath, P225. Jehovah created the whatever you want to call them, the non-chosen in human form so that they would not have to be served by beasts. The non-chosen is consequently an animal in human form and condemned to serve the chosen day and night. Abadora Sarah 37a. A Gentile girl who is 3 years old can be violated. Shulchan Aruch, Joridiah 122. A chosen is forbidden to drink from a glass of wine which a Gentile has touched, because the touch has made the wine unclean. This is how they feel about us. Now, rather than go on and on about this consistent pattern recognition that is salient throughout the text, we must unpack and predict what this implies to North America and the inevitable collapse of the Western Empire in front of us today. So firstly, understand that every culture and people have an underlying worldview that they totally commit towards. Some aren't conscious of it, but the reality is we still have a programming based on a religious structure. And for the chosen people, that cannot be named publicly, of course, segregation and discrimination is one of their core values. If you want to climb the ladder of this faith, you must fully embrace this tenet against other people that are regarded as outsiders. And I'm not one of these low IQ repetitive meme posting political LARPers you see on Twitter. The vast majority of these new quote-unquote anti-Semitic influencers who are nothing but clout-chasing social rejects who are trying to channel their bitterness onto the external world. Their heart is not in the right place, all those people. Even if you argue that they're normalizing these conversations, They are actually a part of the problem because they're just doing nothing but commiserating more hatred, to be honest. I actually understand the psychology behind these chosen knights, and there's no mystery for me on the matter. I see it as clear as day. I'm not just trying to rage bait and create more doom scrolling content. So with all that being said, I want to walk you guys through an example that I was thinking about. This might come out of totally left field for many of you, but stick with this, okay? Hear me out. Do you guys remember the Columbine massacre? The tragic school shooting that has become an iconic symbol of American culture for gun control propaganda in conjunction to the unstable social consequences of bullying and antagonistic peer pressure. We all know of this, right? And it was one of the largest first school shootings in American history. I think the year was 1999, right? And a dozen were killed and like 20 or 30 were injured. I can't remember it exactly. Well, when you study the lives of Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, both of these seniors in high school were grossly unpopular, often mocked, and failed creating any type of connection with their classmates. Perhaps we'll say 109 times over. They felt forever castigated. And when they met each other, they felt this much deeper communication and commiseration because of this. Because being casted as outcasts and black sheeps together sort of emboldened each other, if that makes sense, right? The ostracization of both of them being in the same circumstances created this unholy alliance, and they became thick as thieves, if that makes sense. What did they do in turn? They had sex with each other. And this isn't a trivial joke, because if you want to understand power, you have to understand religion, money, and sex. Those are the three human symbols that dictate the world in all of history. And those are always going to be the nodes that people utilize to understand the true story and intentions of every narrative. And sex, above all else, if you can step back and look at it from a bird's eye view, beyond the feel-good brain chemistry, is a practice that creates bonding and unification. So it makes sense as a political and social tool as well, if you put yourself in the shoes of conquerors looking at human beings in a utilitarian manner. That's why, for example, the 300 Spartans defeated 10,000 Persians, because they were all heavily encouraged to have sex with one another. It's wrong today, but if you just Google the sacred band of Thebes, that was actually the reason they won the Battle of Thermopylae in 480 BCE. They had a deep alliance from an intertwined loyalty, a loyalty that was analogous to an unbreakable chain with no visibly weak links, because they were that connected to another from that type of intimacy. Now, that is repulsive to the Christian morality, rightfully so. And we've evolved to understand the dysfunction that is born out of homosexuality, although we are digressing every day. But the point is that these worldviews are born from a time where societies were much more disconnected. So tribal warfare was in much more higher contrast. So that's how the Columbine kids felt. They felt totally displaced from the outside world and totally alienated from the public square that they were forced to attend. And when they had sex with each other with an atheistic morality that does not believe in a higher good that can heal and forgive, their sacrament became genocidal. Now, what made this even more diabolical is when human beings commit to criminality or atrociousness together, their bonds actually become even greater than the sexual act. That sexual act is actually a gateway for that. And because they were literally 2% of the school, so to speak, or, 2 students out of their entire class, accurately so, you can begin to see exactly why these chosen people have a warped sense of sexuality and continue to separate themselves from all of the other worldview religions by displaying this grandiose heinousness. When you are a historically diaspora population, as in a homeless civilization, you just have to double down in your self-flagellation via self-narrative. And you need to just constantly tell yourself it's because you're so special. You're prosecuted because you're chosen, not because you might have done wrong by destroying the system of others on repeat, God forbid. It's like the peculiar and strange physiognomy teenager in high school who never gets invited out and always feels left behind. It's tragic on one hand, but if he wasn't so socially awkward and stopped victimizing at every turn, maybe he'd make some new friends for a change. And that's exactly what the Columbine shooters felt and had inside of their hearts to take revenge on the world. They took the Samson option into their own hands. So of course, with this worldview, you will utilize sexual blackmailing and honeypotting at every turn. Of course, with this worldview, you feel justified and even entitled to wipe out an entire population of, I can't even name the victims at hand here in Gaza, gleefully casting them out of their own homes and blowing off the limbs of their children away. And of course, with this worldview, you will grant special privileges to insiders and unethically warp your sense of hypocrisy against outsiders without any shame whatsoever. Of course, none of this actually surprises me once you study the text. Of course, this is how it is. All of these chosen people, all they can do at this point is double down because they've simply gone too far. There's literally no going back. If you aren't seeing the mass child genocide that they commit daily with pride, if you haven't seen the Telegram chat groups posting toddlers without arms and legs and they're literally sexualizing them with jokes and mocking them at every turn, you're simply blind to the ignorance that they have clearly chosen their way. And if you're going to still give them the benefit of the doubt in that regard, you're just ignorant to the situation. After 9/11, the attack of the USS Liberty, presidential assassinations, Epstein Island, seeing the funding and money laundering of the military-industrial complex through their political handlers, the blatant disdain they have for true, independent Christianity, the funding behind Open Society, who pushes and fights to keep our borders wide open, Planned Parenthood encouraging women to become antinatalist harpies, the ownership of MindGeek, which is the overmind behind all the porn websites in North America, targeting specifically children if you look at the algorithm and engineering behind the scenes, all of the Hollywood establishment and conservative Inc. political influencer plans, all of these censorship organizations like the ADL or SPLC, and the fact that they're only able to do all of this because we give them $40 billion a year. We're literally paying them to be parasitic towards us. Then you begin to see the root of all these problems at the institutional level. You begin to see the corruption in our leadership, and you begin to see that the corruption of all our institutions will never be honorable. It is based on the tenets that I started this video with, the core values that all of this is permeating from. If you look at all these concentric circles and everything I just listed, at the core nucleus is their worldview and religious structure. Because if your tribe truly believes to be totally ousted as an alien people who have also been forever brainwashed as a persecuted class in conjunction to having this twisted moral sense of sexuality and bonding from shared criminality, of course you will do whatever it takes to manipulate and bend every outsider for the preservation of your people. Because in their shoes, it's the right thing to do. Bloodshed, sacrifice, world hunger, poverty, homelessness, and absolute chaos is all a part of the game. So, once again, we return to this question. Is it the small hats? Yes, it is. But the good news I want to share with you all is that it doesn't mean you have to kowtow your sovereignty to their dark bidding and cultural programming. That's the good news, is that you do still have the power ultimately onto whether they actually affect your lives at that level. I know if you're spending all day on social media, you're going to end up feeling inevitably a sense of emboldening against this endless doom scrolling, right? If I'm here all day, it's going to seem hopeless because it's all hatred, anger, and commiseration on how broken the system is. But I just want to encourage you that you don't have to adopt and practice the same evil that you abhor, which is what the vast majority of these ethno-nationalist types are actually doing online with this political LARPing. It's actually incredibly pathetic to anybody who has a semblance of a positive and successful life outside the screen. That is a tragic situation here, that for the vast majority of normies, the solution to defeat evil has been to become that very evil. And the delusions are becoming beyond deafening for me. The real solution is to first establish sovereignty inside your bones. That is making sure you're not consuming their seed oil and grain sludge based WEF diet. Literal poison, by the way, if you read their agenda. That is making sure you're not living in an atheistic and godless community. There will be no altruism if you live outside of that circle. That is making sure your children aren't attending public school, obviously, which was all designed by those same architects. Speaking of which, it's very funny to me how many times I've met people who anonymously are screaming from the rooftops on their accounts. All these Anon accounts that I've actually met through conference attendance or invite-based social gatherings. And I've met all of these guys with these Julius Caesar profile photos or some kind of Greek or Roman statuesque figure. And behind the screen, they're like disgusting and super fat. And I can't even tell you how embarrassed I would be if I had their existence. And so many of them have gotten vaccinated during COVID-19. And so many of them are encouraging their kids to try to attempt these top-ranked universities. It's absolute hypocritical nonsense that they have accepted as a metric of success because they themselves are still hopelessly brainwashed and consenting to the same programming that they apparently resent. It makes no sense. So in their private lives, they have become totally obedient slaves, but in the public square, they bitch and moan whilst acting like they're a part of some counterculture by propounding this Nazi propaganda, meme culture, without ever showing their face as well, by the way. It's all this revolution-based pony talk just to embarrassingly glaze one another. I'm getting kind of sick of the bullshit, and nobody wants to grow up and look at reality. It's frankly just unhappy people who can't admit that they've been duped. Admit it, we've all been duped, and let's move on. The people who actually see this problem in their bones are living out the solution. Like, I live totally free, regardless of what happens to the world. My house is full of love and light. The walls are full of beautiful paintings and masterpieces. Everyone here is living internally in accordance to God's blueprint. We're all high off animal fat and cholesterol. We all feel deeply connected to the grand design, and we're able to appreciate the blessing that life is, which is an experience that we have been given an opportunity to actualize. Regardless whether or not they're in control or not, this is still a blessing. And if you can't see that, then you're just bitching and moaning. All the institutions are corrupt and abusive. So, check out as much as you humanly possibly can. And you'd be surprised how many people feel the same way that you do. You'll be surprised how many people share that exact sentiment. They're seeing all this Twitter noise and they also find it nauseating and self-flagellating to the nth degree. In reality, it's almost as if we're attending a circus together and like we want the performers to do well. Like, I don't want the act to fall apart, because of that narcissistic director who's having a bad day. But if they botch the act, we shouldn't let it actually affect or offend us. I'm fine because I fully understand that this system is a joke and clown show. We're living in absolute clown world, and the circus is being led clearly astray into oblivion. I've sort of accepted it. People call me black pill, but I'm honestly more free than they'll ever be. And the faster you realize that these conventions are actually traps to appease you with a fake sense of success and accomplishment, the faster you'll be living in accordance to your values and not in accordance to their fake morality and the design that was built to kill you and destroy any sense of authenticity. Fuck being patriotic. Fuck being a real man. Fuck worshiping this celebrity culture. Fuck all of these industry planted conservative influencers. Fuck our world leaders. None of them are good. I promise. The faster you don't care about appeasing those who have been duped by these people, I'm talking about your friends, families, and peers, the faster you can focus on what matters and live a happy life. This is exactly what they don't want. So yes, the game is rigged and in the favor of these people. And nothing you do will ever convince them to let up their power. Understand that. Don't live in delusion. All you can do is think and act outside of the animal farm that they have created. It's them. And it's always been them. So what are you going to do about it?